Nobody is asking the right question about what's building over the American heartland right now. And that's exactly the problem. Because while most people are checking their weekend plans and wondering whether to pack a jacket, the atmosphere is doing something that the models have been quietly screaming about for the last 48 hours. And what they're showing isn't just a storm, it's a sequence, a chain reaction. One that starts with heat you can feel in your chest and ends somewhere most forecasters don't want to talk about yet. So let's talk about it. Here's what you need to understand first. The weather over the next 10 days is not one story. It's 8 stories happening simultaneously, stacked on top of each other, like pressure systems fighting for the same airspace. And the average person is only going to see one piece of it at a time, the piece that hits their street, floods their basement, or shuts down their highway. What nobody's putting together is the full picture. And the full picture is something else entirely. Let's start where this thing actually begins, because it doesn't begin with the storms. It begins with the heat. And not just any heat. We're talking about a 4 corners heat dome sitting in the top 5% of August intensity values. Think about that for a second. August is already the deep end of the pool when it comes to desert heat. The top 5% of that is a different category of event altogether. We're not talking about uncomfortable. We're talking about 115-degree feels-like temperatures in the desert Southwest. We're talking about heat warning criteria being met and exceeded before the weekend even gets here. Phoenix, Tucson, the entire lower Colorado River Basin. That's where this thing is anchored right now, and it is not moving fast. But here's where it gets complicated. Because that heat dome isn't just sitting there baking the desert, it's doing something structural. It's acting like a lid on a pressure cooker over the central part of the country. Warm air aloft, the technical term is a cap, and this cap is sitting on top of the storm fuel in the plains like a weight pressing down on everything underneath it. The atmosphere wants to fire storms. It has everything it needs. Moisture, instability, wind shear, a front draped right across the Missouri Valley. But the cap is holding it all down, and the models cannot agree on when it breaks, where it breaks, or how violently it breaks when it finally does. That uncertainty is actually the most dangerous part of the Saturday setup. Not the storms themselves, the uncertainty about the timing. Over 5 million people from the Central Plains into the Missouri Valley are sitting inside a marginal risk for severe weather Saturday. Kansas City, Omaha, Des Moines, that corridor. And the honest truth is that the real window for severe weather might not open until after 1 in the morning. Which means that if you're in southwest Iowa or across the Missouri River into northwestern Missouri, the most dangerous storms of Saturday night could be arriving while you're completely asleep. Not at 7 p.m. when you're watching the radar. Not at 9 p.m. when you're winding down. At 1, 2, 3 in the morning when your phone is face down and the sirens are 2 counties away. And these storms aren't just going to move through and be done. That's the piece that keeps getting glossed over. A complex is going to form, track east across the Missouri River, and then stall. And the next complex is going to follow the same path, and the one after that. Repetition is the operative word here, and repetition is how basements flood and rivers come out of their banks, and communities that woke up dry go to bed underwater. The atmosphere is loading nearly 1.5 inches of precipitable water overhead. That is a fire hose. Every storm that fires into that moisture column is going to wring it out fast. The ground can only take so much before it stops absorbing and starts running. Flash flooding. That's the Saturday overnight headline. Not tornadoes. Not straight line wind, though those are very much on the table. The flash flooding is the thing that catches people off guard because it's slow enough that you think you have time, and then suddenly you don't. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles to the east, a completely separate disturbance is setting up to spark afternoon storms from northern Virginia through eastern Pennsylvania and into New Jersey on Saturday. Smaller. Less organized, but not harmless. And here's the detail that matters for this one. The Music Fest grounds in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania are sitting right inside the corridor where these storms are expected to develop. Outdoor festival. Tens of thousands of people, trees overhead, temporary structures, afternoon timing. If you know anyone on those grounds this weekend, make sure they know where the nearest solid building is before they walk in. Because these storms can take down branches and knock out power before the radar even lights up red. So Saturday is heat in the southwest, nocturnal severe weather and flash flood risk in the plains, isolated afternoon storms in the mid-Atlantic, and then one genuinely beautiful day sitting right in the middle of all of it like something that wasn't supposed to be there. Minnesota, western Wisconsin. Saturday is going to be arguably the nicest day in the entire country. High pressure locked in behind Friday's departing cold front, dew points in the upper 50s, highs in the upper 70s to low 80s across the Twin Cities metro, Rochester around 79, St. Cloud at 81. Barely any wind, barely any clouds. There's going to be a faint haze from wildfire smoke streaming southeast out of the northern Rockies. More on that in a moment. But for the most part, Saturday in Minnesota is the kind of day you remember at the end of the summer when everything's gone gray and cold again. Lake day, patio dinner, long hike before sunset. Take it. Because Sunday is a completely different conversation. Let's talk about that wildfire smoke for a second. Because it's doing something interesting. The fuels across the northern Rockies are critically dry right now. That's not a surprise in August, but the extent of it is notable. Fires are burning, smoke is streaming southeast across the northern plains and into the upper Midwest, and it's thick enough in some corridors to actually shave 2 to 4 degrees off surface high temperatures. That sounds like a small thing. In some contexts, it is, but when you're trying to model storm development and the sun is being partially blocked by a smoke layer across Iowa and Illinois, that changes your heating rates, your boundary layer depth, your convective available potential energy. It changes when the cap breaks. It changes where the first storm fires. Small variable, real consequences. And here's the part that connects it all. That smoke is coming from the same broad weather pattern, the heat dome, the dry fuels, the atmospheric configuration that is driving everything else this week. This isn't 5 separate weather stories. It's one story with 5 subplots, and every chapter is written by the same ridge of high pressure sitting over the southwest and slowly beginning to wobble eastward. Now let's get to Sunday, because Sunday is when the flooding headline takes the front page. A slight risk of excessive rainfall is now in place from southeast Minnesota through northern Indiana, and that carries into Monday. And the problem here is the same problem as Saturday night. Repetition. A morning complex. Another complex Sunday night. Precipitable water values approaching 2 inches overhead. If you're in that corridor, Chicago Metro, northern Indiana, the southern Lake Michigan shoreline, you need to be thinking about what's below grade in your home, because that's where the water goes. Basements, underpasses, low-lying roads. And this kind of flooding doesn't always come with dramatic warning. One storm passes, everything seems fine. The second storm hits an hour later on saturated ground, and suddenly the creek that was 3 feet below the road is on the road. The severe weather piece on Sunday is actually the secondary story, which tells you something about the primary story's severity. A marginal risk covers over 24 million people from the plains into the southern Great Lakes. That includes Chicago. That includes Indianapolis. Dew points in the 60s and 70s ahead of the front, wind shear values from 45 to 65 miles per hour through the depth of the atmosphere. That combo is more than enough to organize storm clusters into isolated 60-mile-per-hour wind producers as the afternoon turns to evening. And if you've got a flight through O'Hare or to Midway Sunday evening, you should be watching that closely. The air traffic control system across the Midwest has been under stress already this week. A separate outage. In Minnesota, grounded planes across the region just days ago, and more convective weather over the hub airports in Chicago, Omaha, and Des Moines is exactly what an already strained system doesn't need. But that's exactly what's coming. And then there's Monday. Monday is the day I want you to lock in on, because everything that's been building, the heat, the moisture, the front, the shear, it all comes into focus on Monday. And the Storm Prediction Center is already paying attention. A 15% severe weather probability now covers over 26 million people stretching from northern Illinois through western Pennsylvania, Chicago, Milwaukee, Detroit, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. That is a substantial chunk of the American population sitting inside what is, for a forecast at this range, a loud signal. And it is the only highlighted severe weather area anywhere in the 4 to 8 day forecast window. Every model, every ensemble, every forecaster looking at this setup is pointing at the same corridor on the same day. That kind of consensus at this range is not something to brush past. Here's the mechanism. Winds from the south are pumping moisture north off the Gulf, loading dew points into the mid to upper 70s across the entire Great Lakes corridor. That is tropical grade moisture. Swamp air sitting at 42 degrees north latitude. The low-level jet is anchored strongest from northern Illinois into western Pennsylvania, and that's where storm convergence is going to be maximized. Simultaneously, upper-level winds of around 60 miles per hour are aligned in a way that translates directly downward into developing storms, which means any cluster that forms is going to have immediate access to the kind of wind that makes headlines. Damaging wind is going to be the primary hazard. Not tornadoes, though those can't be ruled out. Not hail, though the hail threat is real. Widespread damaging wind across a 26 million person corridor on a Monday afternoon and evening is what I'm most focused on. And timing matters here too, because Monday isn't just another day. The Wisconsin State Fair is running at full capacity in West Allis, just outside of Milwaukee. Outdoor venue, crowds in the tens of thousands, open fields, vendor tents and temporary structures. Monday afternoon is right in the prime window for these storms to fire and push east through that exact area. 60-plus mile-per-hour winds through a state fairground is a serious situation, and the people running that event need to have a weather plan ready to execute. Keep your alerts turned on loud. Know where the permanent structures are. Watch the western sky. The timing for Monday's storms points to the afternoon into the evening window, which means this is going to be overlapping directly with the evening commute, with outdoor dining, with boats on Lake Michigan, with ball games and concerts, and all the things that a warm August Monday brings out. If your plans take you outside anywhere in that northern Illinois to western Pennsylvania corridor Monday afternoon, you need a fast way to get inside, and you need to know what that looks like before you leave the house. Now here's the wild card inside Monday's forecast, and this is the piece that could change everything. Sunday night's storm complex is going to leave a layer of clouds and outflow boundaries behind. Where Monday's heating breaks through that layer matters enormously. If the sun pops through early and aggressively over northern Illinois, the instability values could climb high enough to push this setup from a marginal situation to an enhanced risk caliber event. The Storm Prediction Center hasn't pulled that trigger yet, and they're right not to at this range, but the atmospheric ingredients for an enhanced risk are absolutely on the table. When the picture sharpens over the next 48 hours, that upgrade is a real possibility. Watch for it. While all of this is unfolding across the Great Lakes, the bigger picture is extending south and east. The ridge over the southwest is beginning its eastward drift, and as it slides, it reopens the moisture pipeline from the Gulf of Mexico into the southern plains and southeast. And this is the beginning of the next heat wave, not a brief spike. A sustained, multi-day, relentless heat event that is going to drive heat index values to 105 to 115 degrees across Gulf cities into the middle of the week. Oklahoma, North Texas, the entire lower Mississippi Valley. Daytime highs of 100 to 105 with overnight lows that only drop into the 70s, which means the body never resets. The house never cools down. The relief never actually comes. For the elderly, for outdoor workers, for anyone without reliable air conditioning. This is a public health event, wearing the costume of a weather event. Check on your people. This is the part of the forecast that doesn't make dramatic video, but it's the part that actually hurts people. And then farther downstream, into the latter half of the week, the Ohio Valley and Central Appalachians are looking at a multi-day rain event that deserves a paragraph of its own. A slow-moving boundary anchored across the northern tier is going to focus repeated rounds of heavy rainfall from Monday through Wednesday across eastern Kentucky, West Virginia, and the hill country of the Central Appalachians. The local storm totals of 2 to 4 inches, with some spots potentially exceeding that. And here's why that number is more alarming than it sounds in that specific geography. The terrain of eastern Kentucky and West Virginia forces water in one direction, down. Steep creek drainages, narrow valleys, roads that follow the only flat ground available, which is right next to the water. These are communities that have seen this before. They know what fast-rising creeks look like. And the forecast is pointing directly at them. Again, over multiple days, with each day's rain landing on ground that's already been saturated by the previous day's rain. By Wednesday, even a modest additional inch of rainfall in these areas could produce significant impacts because the ground has simply run out of capacity to absorb anything. Tuesday brings some spreading severe weather threat near Omaha as a pocket of storm fuel stalls west while the front sags south, but predictability is too low at this range to give you a precise corridor. What I can tell you with confidence is that wherever storms fire into an atmosphere carrying 1.5 to 2 inches of precipitable water, rainfall rates are going to be extreme. If a storm passes over your area and it's raining harder than you've ever seen it rain before, that's not a coincidence. That's the atmospheric moisture content doing exactly what physics says it should. Wednesday offers a narrow window of good news. The Ohio Valley rain event looks like it's in its final well-supported day. One more round of heavy rain across the Appalachians, and then the pattern begins to shift. The ground will still be a sponge, so even lighter rainfall will produce runoff, but the sustained conveyor belt of moisture-laden storms finally begins to break down. Small comfort, but real comfort. Then the air mass flip arrives. Canadian air spills into the upper Midwest and Great Lakes late in the week, dropping highs into the 70s and overnight lows down into the 50s. After everything that happens between now and then, the storms, the heat, the flooding, the weeks of summer humidity, that cold air is going to feel like a different planet. Minnesota and Wisconsin are going to go from excessive rainfall risk to the nicest air of the entire summer in the span of about 36 hours. The atmosphere can do that. It can turn on a dime. But here's where the story doesn't end cleanly, because the Climate Prediction Center is already looking at the August 14th through 20th window. And what they're seeing is a moderate risk of extreme heat from the southern and central plains through the lower Mississippi Valley and into the southeast, running from the 14th through the 16th. Moderate risk. That's not the language the Climate Prediction Center uses casually. A 30 to 50% probability of heat exceeding the 90th percentile for that time of year across a region that's already been baking for weeks. Heat index values once again in the 105 to 115 range. Record warm overnight lows, flirting with the charts in multiple cities, And simultaneously, a slight risk of heavy rainfall running from the desert southwest into the Rockies and onward into the plains and Ohio Valley from the 14th through the 17th, with Arizona actually trending wetter than normal, and 3-day rainfall totals of over an inch becoming more likely across Nebraska, Colorado, and Wyoming, which are sitting in genuine drought conditions right now and desperately need the moisture. So the pattern coming out of this week doesn't resolve into clean, simple weather. It transitions into a new version of the same complexity. Heat in one corridor, flooding in another, relief in a third. All of it interconnected, all of it driven by the same slowly evolving large-scale atmospheric setup that's been in control for weeks. And here's the question that doesn't have an answer yet. That ridge over the southwest, the one driving the heat dome, the one acting as a lid on the plains storms, the one slowly sliding east and reloading the Gulf moisture pipeline, how long does it hold? Because if it persists longer than the models are currently showing into the back half of August, everything changes. The drought picture changes, the fire weather picture changes, the heat wave duration changes. The entire sequence we just walked through could be a preview of a longer story, not a standalone chapter. Nobody's talking about that yet. The models are only showing so far. The ensembles have widespread beyond week 2. But the pattern has momentum, and patterns with momentum tend to outlast their forecasts. This is the part where I tell you to stay ready. Keep your weather radio on your nightstand, not because I think you can't handle what's coming, but because what's coming is the kind of sequence that moves faster than most people expect. Saturday night storms arrive while you're asleep. Monday's wind event hits during the evening commute. Tuesday's flooding happens on ground that was already wet from Sunday. The atmosphere doesn't wait for convenient timing, it just goes. Watch this one closely. The next 10 days are going to be worth paying attention to.